has culminated in one big question that we wanted to ask you, Sean. Something that we're hoping that turns a few heads. Do you think that you are the best player in the UK?
I
Welcome everybody to the next episode of Battle Chads. I'm Josh. I'm here with my co-host Luis.
Hey guys, how's everyone doing?
And we've got a very, very special guest today. Pro Tour top 8 winner, not winner, but Pro Tour top 8 person himself, Sean Goddard. How are we doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Happy to be here.
Good. So Sean, tell us a bit about yourself. When do you start playing Magic, or how you got into Magic, and sort of your journey to sort of now?
So I started like 2013 with Theros. Got really into Limited, like right from the start, but just casually drafting at F&M and then drafting down at the pub, then going to Limited GPs and getting better that way. And then eventually, like, just accidentally qualified, played Modo, qualified for Pro Tour in 2020, and then have kind of been playing at a higher level since then.
You know what, drafting at the pub sounds like a really good way to get into Magic, because it's all about, we emphasize it on this pod, like it's all about the gathering. The gathering is 2/3 of the game, and it's how you sort of get into it is the gathering part, and then it's brilliant. But you've absolutely smashed the Magic scene recently. You've been one of the key names in sort of UK Magic that comes up on everyone's sort of Twitter, Discord, etc. And I'm really glad you'd come onto our podcast and have a chat about Pro Magic, and particularly sort of the limited draft sort of side.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's quite an amazing thing. We're very happy to have you, Sean. And as some of you may have noticed, good old Josh here is not in his usual abode. He's over. Are you in the States right now?
No, I'm in Devon.
You're in Devon right now. So you're going to be going to the States for Vegas, was it?
Yeah. So I bought my tickets for MagicCon Vegas this morning. So where I am right now, I'm on a course with the Royal Marines, and I'm in the sort of same place where Will Hall works.
Right.
So obviously me and Will Hall have been smashing Nando's while I've been down here. And we got
That's not the only thing they've been smashing, if you know what I mean.
Well, it is royally after all. And we decided, or he had this great idea of potentially going to Las Vegas, a bit of a boys' trip away, and then potentially doing a little road trip afterwards. So I'll see if I can get that time off work.
So for all the States listeners, Josh will be over there representing Battle Chats along with Will Hall. So feel free to say hi whenever he's down there. When that comes up.
Speaking of Will, you'll be there, Sean. Speaking of Will, though, Sean, I was speaking to Will yesterday, and apparently you've got some of his property. A belt, apparently.
Yeah, well, okay. So he says, I need to get this belt, like, back from the States. So will you I know you're going to Vegas. Will you just pick it up whilst you're there? I'm like, fine. I get it from this very confused bloke over there. It's like, yeah, I have Bill's belt, whatever. I bring it back. But then, like, the next Axiom thing that I'm at, he's not at. And then the next thing that he's at, I'm not at. So I've just had his belt, like, in my drawer for the last few months. So you'll get it back, I guess, in Naples, if I remember to bring it.
So I think it's actually in law that if the owner doesn't claim it after 3 months, it becomes like a finder's finders keepers essentially in law. Like, I think it's like a 3-month cut off.
Amazing.
So you alluded before about drafting and limited and all that kind of stuff. And during the pre-note or the pre-brief, we talked about the fact that during people's sort of professional or pro pathway, when they actually get to the like Pro Tour sort of levels or that sort of level of Magic, drafting is a skill that they all of a sudden start to stress over because it's something that they've neglected up until that point. I wonder if, Sean, if you could talk to us about like any tips on someone who wants to approach drafting and how to get not only proficient at it but how to get professional at it.
Yeah. Essentially, how did you get into drafting? What do you do coming up to these big events that really heightens your skills or lets you refine them in preparation for something so big. Most people don't make it to the Pro Tour, and even when they do, they're always in the 0-3 bucket, kind of having a party down there after their draft. So how did you get yourself ready for such a large scale event, and what makes you so good at it?
Well, yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. There's a lot of people just overrate the average like Pro Tour player when it comes to draft. I mean, Pro Tour players are very good, obviously, but in drafts specifically, like a lot of people just qualify through constructed and are kind of in the same boat of, okay, I've played a ton of constructed, but I've not actually played a lot of draft. And so I'm not sure like the average Pro Tour drafter is that much better than like the average drafter in an 8-person pod on Modo. Granted, like those 8-person pods are filled with crushes anyway, but still, it's so there's a bit to which we like mythologize Pro Tour players as being just great at every format, and there is just some weakness across the board. And I'm good at draft. I'm not like the best drafter, but but I'm well above average at draft, and I think that translates to being above average at draft at the Pro Tour as well. But there are some really like key things people miss about preparing. So there's two kind of opposite, like contradictory things I'm going to say. Is use all the stuff from Arena, like use all the 17 lands, the stats, the kind of the access to playing a ton of games you can do with that. But then also don't rely on that. Like just also play a load of 8-person pods with other good players. And honestly, if you do those two things and do them enough, then you can't go far wrong. But a lot of people just don't. Like they do one or the other, or even neither.
Would that translate? So say if every time a set comes out and the set changes, like obviously the mechanics change, the sort of color pairings, the power change between the color pairings, etc. So you take that model of using the arena and using those 8-person pods, but how do you approach a new sort of set, and how do you sort of, I'm trying to think of not a better word than defeat, but how do you figure out that set when it comes to drafting or limited?
Yeah. Well, so it depends how much time you have. So this time we didn't have much time at all. We had like 8 days between the online release and deck submission for the Pro Tours, like 10 days total to actually draft.
Yeah.
And so with that, you're just trying to fit in as many drafts as you can and like find a few key things out of the format, like what colors are good, what cards are good, what cards are traps, and what's like maybe you find one or two underrated archetypes. But when you have more time, then you can go into much more depth and look at, okay, so from all this data we have, these are like the colors that perform well, these are the cards performing well. You can get like a pick order, right, without having to do the laborious, like it used to be everyone would just get in a room for a limited meeting and you'd have all the cards and you'd try and arrange them in tiers and you'd spend hours arguing over, oh, is this card a B or a C? And now you can just skip all that because you can just look at the data and say, okay, well, this is a rough idea. And then you can take that and actually test it in the real world by sort of getting down around a table and drafting.
Yeah, because but once you figure out those sort of those powerful combinations, etc., within that set, are other people on that same wavelength? Is it sort of like a race between teams to figure that out? And if so, and once that set is figured out, how do you go about then drafting in an 8-person pod competitively? Like, how does that affect your card picks? And I'm thinking, like, do I pick the best colors because I know everyone else is going to get the best colors, so there's going to be like a fight for those best colors, or do I pick that mediocre deck that you said, but I'll get all the cards for that deck?
Yeah. So I tend to, I'm not saying this is a way to do it. I tend to end up drafting like the second best color a lot. It usually ends up, okay, going to a Pro Tour, there's a very clear best color, like a very clear best archetype that people want to be in. and there's like a slightly less clear, but second best that will be much less drafted. That said, when you're actually like sat in the draft, you want to draft what's open, and for all our talk of like metagaming around what colors are actually the best and what colors people think are the best, your highest win rate will just be drafting what's open. Like very, very rarely in the past 2 years has there been an actual unplayable color combination. Like the closest I can think of is maybe blue-green in Lord of the Rings, which was a full trap, but even then, like occasionally you'd want to do it.
Yeah.
I've gotten beat down by one too many scrying elves. All right, don't get me started on that.
I actually, speaking of Lord of the Rings draft, I actually drafted because I'm not a big drafter. I drafted Lord of the Rings yesterday in Exeter with Will Hall was there. We had an 8-person pod. He came first, I came second, and I ended up drafting red green like elves with the scry effect. But I forget what the name of the card is. It's a 5-dropper. Every time you attack, you scry 2.
Doors of Durin.
Say that again. Sorry.
Doors of Durin.
I forget the name. It's a red green 5-mana card. Like we talked about this before, didn't we? For the pre-group, you don't remember the name of cards, but I can tell you what they do. And every time you scry, and every time you attack, you can reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a creature, it comes in attacking.
You put in an Oliphant to Agenda Ascent.
Yeah. It was sick. It was so good, but because usually those color combinations were traditionally the green blue, as you said, but I didn't even touch blue.
How much so how much do you think coming into this draft, because of how new the set was, you had a week to prepare for it, do you think people just overpicked aggro? Because I know a lot of the time people say, if the set's so new and you don't know what you're doing, just pick aggro and it'll work out. It's a very common tactic that people use.
Yeah, so the thing this time was aggro was very clearly quite bad. Or at least the red decks were quite bad, and going red-white aggro was specifically just like really just never working. Ride Down, by the way, which was like an all-star in the Khans of Tarkir red-white aggro decks, is barely playable. Like I do not like that card at all in this format. So I think most people were wise to this. They were understanding there were limitations of these aggro decks. And the reason for this is that the green creatures are just so much bigger than your red and white creatures. So most people understood that green was like the level 1 best color of the format. And if you're playing like 4-mana 4/4s with vigilance, then you'll be quite good against the aggro decks.
So it was a bit opposite of like Karlov Manor, for example, where Boros was everything. Yeah. Everyone somehow had a Aurelia. There was 15 every single time you ever play the freaking draft. A bit different this time around. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I'd say the closest thing in this format to the red-white decks was the green-white decks, and that those were like the best archetype if it's open, but it needs to be open, and there will be people fighting over it. But if you somehow got an open green-white seat and you had the Mounts deck and you had, now I'm forgetting cards' names, but the green-white 2-drop 3/2 that puts counters whenever you attack with Mounts, and you just curve that into any 3-drop Mount, and then you just win.
And how did it feel now with play boosters? Because that's been a very hot topic about. Are play boosters just a bit much because of the amount of rares that you find in them? Obviously, this was a draft instead of a sealed, so it's a little more fair in that way. But how have you found it? What is the word on the street with it, at least?
Yeah, so I think they are kind of a problem for league drafting and like arena queue drafting, because there you're not drafting a pod. If you're winning in an arena queue, you will start to play against people with completely busted decks. And it's a huge problem for sealed, as you alluded to. For pod drafts, it's not actually been that bad. Like, I've found it okay. You get slightly more busted rares, you get slightly fewer cards wheeling, but that is balanced out by the fact there's more uncommons now. Sure. And the uncommons are really good. So my Theo deck on day 2 of the last Pro Tour was a black-white deck with no rares in it. Or I had 2 rare lands and a special guest card, but then just a stack of uncommons, and it was literally the strongest deck I've drafted in that format, like before or since. It was just absurd.
That's wild.
And how have the special guest cards and all that kind of jazz? I wasn't very excited looking at what they were revealing. When my opponent pulls an Oko or even a Thoughtseize, these kind of effects aren't exactly weak. They're very powerful in the draft format.
Did you see that reanimate?
Yeah. That was so sad. That was so sad, man.
That was so sick. What was that card that you discarded for a land?
Oh, it was
7/7. Right?
the 7/7. I don't know what its name is. The armadillo, was it something?
Spider-
Armadillo?
Yeah,
that one.
So
The one they're playing in Quintorius now.
Yeah, he discarded it in his end step, untapped, reanimated.
It's
Just legacy.
Here's my what was it, 3 ward or something like that on the stupid armadillo? Just ridiculous.
Something like that, yeah.
Ridiculous. Or who was it that was playing against him? It was the friendliest guy in all of Magic. What's his name? No, everyone loves him. He's always in doing so well. What's his name? Oh my god, I'll remember sometime during the podcast. But
we'll talk about something else in there. Yeah. So Luis's question was, how do you feel about the special showcase cards that were in the set?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think they're bad. I think some of them are a little much. Like Oko is probably too good, but most of them are not they're not even as good as the best main set rares, and a lot of them do actually do interesting things. So I would say an interesting example is Archive Trap, which is very strong, but requires you to build around it and requires you to actually put a lot of thought into your deck building and into how you approach the game. Also, there's a lot of cards that are just solid playables, like Buried in the Garden is that could be in the main set. I mean, it was in the last main set, so it's a very quick reprint. But does something slightly interesting. Thoughtseize is that card is just fine, right? Limited power level.
Yeah.
It's a reasonably strong card to play on turn 1, but it's a terrible top deck late in the game. And it's not. I wouldn't actually say it's any stronger than the 2-mana Thoughtseize effect in the format, because the 2-mana one doesn't lose you life, and in limited, the difference between 1 and 2 mana is much less.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in general they're pretty well balanced, aside from just a couple of outliers like Oko.
Mana Leak, all those fun cards.
How much thought do you give? So, because I'm trying to think as spiky as possible when I'm trying to think of the stuff, and how much thought do you give into hate drafting or trying to figure out what other people are on? Does it help if you know the set so much that you can figure out what colours other people are on, or what deck archetypes they might be on? And thusly, if you do know that set so much, can you play around cards? Because when I sit down and draft, I haven't got a clue.
Yeah, so there's a couple of different parts of that. So I do pay attention to what I think I'm passing and what I think I'm getting past, and if I can, if I know I've passed some devastating trick, I will be playing around that, or at least be aware of that when I'm playing someone of that color. So I pass 2 Snakeskin Veils, I'm against a green player, I'm playing around Snakeskin Veil.
Yeah.
But I'm not hate drafting. I'm basically never hate drafting. I hate draft even less than other pro players I know. It's almost never correct, because you think the chances of you playing against that card, for any given card you're playing, you'll play against 3 of the 7 other players in the draft. So you need to play against that person, and you need them to draw that card, and crucially, you need it to then be worse for them to have that against you in that already unlikely scenario than the difference between taking the card you wanted from that pack. So if there's literally nothing in the pack, sure. But if there's like a playable sideboard card, I'll take the sideboard card. Like people don't take sideboard cards enough in limited as well, but that's a different point entirely.
Yeah, that's something I've never done. When we played against Will yesterday, he was sideboarding games. I'm just like there with my deck that I drafted. Like, no, I'm just gonna keep this here. Is there a certain skill into picking, like sort of what sideboard cards you pick? Because obviously you need to prioritize sort of like I guess the earlier packs. It's like, oh, these are main board priority playable cards, and then I guess later on you then sort of look at like, oh, could this be good in the sideboard? And if so, what kind of things are you looking out for that?
Well, so it's a little. Okay, this isn't actually one of the best formats for it. There have been previous formats where it was really important to get like a specific kind of sideboard card. So formats with powerful enchantments and artifacts. I'm thinking back to. I don't want to go all the way back to like Theros Beyond Death, but there's been plenty where you'd like, okay, I have this Return to Nature, and it's going to start on my sideboard, but this is essential that I have it in my sideboard.
Wildsville Drain, right? That had a good
yeah.
of artifact.
Yeah, Wildsville Drain's a good example. Or then in going back to Lord of the Rings, it's really important to have, if you're playing black, to pick up one of the 3 mana -1/-1 effects. Because if you play against red-white or black-white, but mainly red-white, you need that card in your sideboard, and it's like an actual bomb to have that if they played, Rally the
Hornbird. Yeah, I knew it. I knew as soon as you said red-white. Oh, that card! I got beat down by that card so often, man. Oh,
yeah,
brutal card.
So you're not taking these at game like higher than your main deck cards for the most part, but you're taking them against main deck filler. So if you're over the course of the draft, you think, okay, I'm basically definitely going to get more than 23 cards that I want to play. I'll be making some cards. I could take this like vanilla 3 mana 3/3. That would be the 26th card in my deck, or I can take a playable sideboard card. You just take the sideboard card. And for me, like a hate pick versus a sideboard card, it's the same thing. Like the hate pick is not going to be worth more to me than that sideboard card.
Yeah, that's fair. I like that. I like that analysis. I guess you're taking that hate card is almost it's almost like half a sideboard pick, because you're taking something or denying something of someone, but it's only that one person you're denying them. Where if you pick a sideboard card, then that can be used in multiple games over the course of your draft. It's really interesting, actually.
You heard it here, folks. You pick the cards that help your deck first, not the cards that will absolutely bomb you out. This is what Sean Goddard says. So when you get absolutely destroyed by someone's I don't know, what is it, -2/-2 to all your creatures because you're playing a mono weenies deck, it's his fault, not yours. Remember that.
Yep.
So when you actually what was the question I was going to ask then? Yeah. So someone who's like sort of doesn't hardly ever draft and says like, oh, they get past the card and the rare's still in there. What would be the explanation for that? Like, when would be a situation where you would pick a common or an uncommon over the pack's rare?
Well, okay, so again, this question gets kind of invalidated thanks to play boosters, I'm afraid. Because nowadays, you get past a pack with a rare in it. The pack could have had 1 rare to start with. It could have had 4 rares to start with. Like, you can get a, we had a pack in a testing draft where someone got past pack 1, pick 3 Roxanne, and was like, guys, we need to stop the draft. Like, this is really important, actually. We know this card's good, right? And first 2 picks were Oko Fractured Identity.
Oh, God! Oh, my God!
So it's way hard to make any sort of read from that nowadays.
Yeah.
But in general, like, there's a lot of just uncommons that are stronger than rares. And again, you can go on like 17 lands and get some idea from the stats. And kind of having access to this data is helping change a bit of the instincts people have of like, okay, this card has a gold symbol, it must be better than this card with a silver symbol. And that's never really been true. It's been true like on average, but not absolutely, if that makes sense. Like there's a lot of a lot of bad rares and a lot of very good uncommons and uncommons. So yeah, we're starting to challenge that, and the average rare is still going to be better, but I'm taking an uncommon like maybe only slightly less often than a rare.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, I guess this whole play booster sort of stuff sort of changes that dynamic, and it's sort of this play booster stuff is like it's a massive impact on this sort of limited sort of scene, particularly when it's changing the dynamic of it essentially. Would you agree?
Yes, but I would say less so in pod drafts still. Like,
which is not something a lot of people do.
Yeah, exactly. Like pod drafts still feel like real drafts, and I still, you still get the same dynamics. You get to wheel slightly fewer cards. 14 cards in the pack instead of 15. You do actually notice that difference. And you can't read signals as easily. But in terms of like, you can send signals the same way, and later in the pack you can read signals. And so most of it, I would say, is still the same. Online drafting in leagues has just got a bit weird now, I would say. But
yeah, that makes sense.
So, sorry, Luis, have you got any more questions on the drafting sort of things before we move on to say constructed?
No, I think we covered a good basis on everything there. If anyone has any extra questions, feel free to put them in the comments. They're always appreciated, and I'm sure one of us will bug Sean for the answer and get it to you as soon as we can.
Have you got anything to add, Sean, last minute after burners before we move on to this sort of constructed side of things?
No, I think it's good.
Yep, just that. So yeah, constructed. So a lot, as you alluded before, a lot of people focus, or a lot of pro players focus on the constructed side of things because that's how they qualified. That's sort of the focus they put into, because it's the sort of I don't know if it's the more popular side of the game in terms of what people watch or how it's publicized on Twitch, etc. But it's the part that I tend to watch more of. So when you come to the constructed part of any major tournament, let's say the Pro Tour, what is your process in picking a deck? Because I know from when I know from the past you picked deck when you played Lotus Field in the previous Pro Tour you played Lotus Field, but you played you didn't play what was the 3 green mana?
Archdruid Charm.
Yeah, you didn't play that charm when everyone was like, why is he not playing this? And so basically what I want to know is how do you pick your deck archetype, and then once you've picked that archetype, what is the process of them building around with that archetype for a big tournament?
How do you differentiate your list from the stock list that you see everyone running? How do you make those choices? What brings you to that decision making?
Mm-hmm. So to give a very boring answer, I try and pick the deck that I think will give me the highest chance to win. But kind of breaking that down, like what will give me the highest chance to win is not necessarily the same as what the best deck is.
Yeah.
And so I tend to look a bit more at combo decks, just my kind of play style preference. And I tend to steer a bit away from like the generic best kind of mid-range deck, because the best deck is usually some flavor of mid-range, like Esper or the Rakdos and previous standard. Just because I feel like it's harder to get an edge in like, or it's harder for me to get an edge playing kind of mirrors with those decks against really good players, compared to playing some slightly less popular combo deck where I can target the best deck and like. But okay, in general, I'm putting a lot of thought into my position in the expected meta. So I'm not picking a deck because I like it if it's bad against the best deck. And I'm ideally picking a deck that's good against the best deck. So at Chicago, I was playing Lotus Field in large part because it was good against Phoenix. And some of the deck choices, so the fact I was playing Strict Proctor and not the Charm, were kind of geared around, okay, I want to be better against what I view as some of the best decks. So in that case, Proctor was very good against Amalia, and Convoke, although Convoke I sort of missed because there was hardly any Convoke in the load of Heroic, so that was kind of the downside of that call. And then this tournament, I was picking Analyst because, again, Esper was like the accepted best deck, but Analyst seemed to just have. Analyst was kind of an exception because it just had no bad matchups, and like people were not respecting it at all. So this is okay. Well, this is me playing the best deck, but I don't think it's like the deck that's being targeted the most by people, and it's not the most played deck. So I guess that's a simpler way to say it, right? I would rather not be playing the most played deck, but I would like to play like one of the best decks.
Sure. I know from like speaking to Arne from I can't remember, is it Team CFB, is it? He was saying that part of the reason that a lot of people discounted, or at least their team discounted playing Analyst, was because it wasn't a great matchup into Esper on MTGO from what they were seeing. Because on MTGO, everyone was rocking 2 or 3 Rest in Peace. Come the Pro Tour, everyone was running 1 or 0. No one was using it. So then the Teamer Analyst matchup became that much harder. And Analyst was able to get around it because people just weren't respecting it. People weren't using the Rest in Pieces or the Graveyard Hate Pieces for it.
Kind of. So there were some reasonable number of Rest in Peace. I would say that for the average Esper deck, it's more like 1.5 Rest in Peace rather than half Rest in Peace per list. But yeah, they were slightly less hateful than Modo. People weren't respecting the deck as much. And we found a good plan for Esper because we knew that Esper was what we needed to target. So we had the full couple of weeks to say, okay, how do we make this matchup palatable pasteboard? And part of that was Pick Your Poison, which was great against Rafine and Rest in Peace. Part of that was Bonnie-Pearl, which you just they play Rest in Peace, they do whatever you want. You slam Bonnie-Pearl, and then you have 2 huge bodies, one of which can block all their flyers. So we found good plans for the matchup, and the matchup was less hateful than it could have been.
See, I like the way you approach this, because there's two things that resonate with me with there, because we spoke about these we spoke about in previous pods. One is not necessarily picking the best deck, but picking a deck that is best for you. Because if you understand and you resonate with that deck, then you're gonna get the best results or the best intricacies out of that deck. Secondly, you sideboarding for their sideboards. You mentioned them, Pick Your Poison. That's a great little tech for against Esper, because it hits Rafines and it hits their sideboard cards against you as well. So yeah, I like that approach. It's something that we've talked about, and it's something that I like to see a player such as yourself, upper echelons of your of anyone's Magic career, really, sort of bring in those points of view and ways of thinking, and actually bringing it to bear, like with fruit of your labor, I guess.
How far in advance would you say that you have your deck decided? Do you think it's something that, because I see a lot of people, they decide the night before. You hear the stories from all the pros. Oh, I made this final choice, on the sideboard piece, or this piece in the 60, whatever changes they make, all the way until the very last second of submitting your deck list. How do you approach that?
There's always some of that. There's always some last minute stress. The last couple of Pro Tours, I've been quite comfortably locked on a deck, at least a week before submission.
Oh, that's great.
And locked into kind of a choice of 3 decks maximum, from 3 weeks until deck submission. I'll reach a point where I'm like, okay, if one of you teammates finds a broken deck, then I'll look at it. But right now, I'm looking at these 3. These are my range, and then hopefully I'm narrowing down to 1, and then narrowing that down to a list. So I was pretty confident I was on Team Lands from a week before. I was bringing Team Lands, Boris Convoke, and Domain with me as the decks I packed in my bag to the house because I was that sure those were my three options. And yeah, we did end up having like a few. I made a literal last minute sideboard change. 1 minute before, so like 10 minutes before deck submission, message teammate who isn't in the house on Discord, and he makes a valid point about, I think it was a Braid versus Sky Turtle in a sideboard slot. And he made some valid points about Sky Turtle in the Esper matchup, which I hadn't considered. And we have like a really quick, in-depth discussion, and then I submit Sky Turtle in that slot, like literal, I think maybe 40 seconds before the deadline. Yeah.
Wow.
But
I can't tell you how happy I am that turtle scene play. When it was revealed, I was like, man, there's an awesome turtle. And then I was like, please see some play. I think I was happy when Living End was playing it for a little while, and then they dropped that rather quickly. So I'm happy to see that the good old turtle still seeing some play.
It must be quite comforting though that you can have your deck selection that far in advance, and when you're sort of day before, because there's something about that feeling of the day before of a big tournament. You're like looking at 2 cards, like which my 16 card sideboard needs to be 15. Which one of you two's going?
yeah,
It must be quite comforting knowing that you've got your deck sorted that far in advance, and
yeah. Well, also we're doing a lot of work in advance, so usually we're working as a team. We're doing a bunch of testing, and we're testing like several weeks in advance. So we're learning new things at the house, but most of the new things we're learning like are intricacies of how to navigate a matchup, what we want in the sideboard, how this list is going to look like specifically. The key things of, is this matchup good? Like, what does the metagame look like? What decks are good? That you should know more than sort of a week and a half in advance.
Yeah.
So most of the time you can make like a reasonable deck choice by then. But some people still leave it to the last minute.
And as a team, how do you guys approach it? Do you all tell each other that you have to be on the same deck come the end of it, or do you just let people do what they feel is best for them, or how do you approach that kind of?
We're very relaxed. We will try and like talk it through with everyone, and if we think someone's making a full-on mistake of a deck choice, then we're going to spend a long time talking to them. Like, okay, I think this is an actual mistake. Let's talk through it. But if someone wants to play a deck, there's no like, okay, team management is going to say you can't do this at all. There's no team management. Right? We're just essentially we're working together, testing together, but there's no like, there's not a point where we're going to tell each other you can or can't do this like thing that you think is going to give you your best success.
You're not quite like a Team Handshake that all play the same exact list, same deck every time.
I feel like even Team Handshake is maybe less rigid than people think.
No, I don't think they're rigid. I just think they just end up that way. But yeah.
How do you value like a team, being on a team? Do you think being on the team has helped you reach the level that you've achieved?
Yeah, 100%. It's I think the biggest thing I've done in the past like year and a half in terms of Magic is joining a team and working with that team. And this isn't, so some of it is testing with better players than you, and testing with players who are at least as good as you are, and sort of improving and learning is super important. But just in general, testing with a team and getting into good testing routines, getting into like the important discussions of, okay, I'm going to have to actually justify this choice I'm making. I can't just hand wave it and say, yeah, I'm choosing this deck based on vibes. Like, you have to, you get into much better practices from just working with other people. So I think it's essential. And also with the limited side, if if you don't have like a group of 8 people to draft with, then you're going to struggle going to Pro
Yeah.
Tour.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be 8 qualified people, but my number one advice for like any new Pro Tour player is just find 7 other people who will draft with you, because you need to do some pot drafts.
But you have to draft it with purpose, right? You have to. So these games you play, these games that you're testing with, you a lot of times you sit at F&M or your game store and you're playing your deck, and they're just sort of doing the movements and they're sort of, oh yeah, I'm going to do this and pass turn, and then they're not really giving it much thought. But when you're playing to test, you have to test with purpose. Am I right? So you have to test against people who are actively trying to beat you. And if you're in a pod of 8, you're not asking people who just like to draft the 5-color rare because it's funny. Do we need to try and draft people who want to win that draft? Because if you're not playing against people who want to win or have that thirst to win, then you're not going to improve, and they're not going to improve, and it's just not. So I think my point on that is the right pod against with the right people and the right team. It's got to be. You've got to have that in order to progress. Is the point that I'm trying to make.
And you got to see how people deal with Goifgate in your drafts as well. For everyone who knows what that is.
I passed a not foil, but I passed a Pro Tour stamped Mind Break trap at this Pro Tour, and
it's hurt. It's gotta hurt. Oh like, man,
I don't know. I was very tempted. It's possible. Like there was a strong playable in the pack. It was like the 1 and a green bite spell, right. But yeah, I don't know. What was that worth it?
You were able to resist. You were able to resist. That makes sense. Okay.
I have very good pro player friends who would not have made that choice. I'm not judging them. Like, it's fine.
Fair one.
Very fair.
Yeah. So, what is your like? Say if there was a pro tour you could choose, what would be your favorite format? Like, what is your favorite format?
Draft. If we could have just a full draft pro tour, which I know used to happen and I know will never happen again. It's a fool's dream, but I would love it.
Yeah.
And I'd win it. So
I do enjoy that.
I think you would.
I do think watching draft games is a lot less fun though than just watching the actual draft itself or the constructed gameplay. Watching draft games feels so silly to me. I just can't do it. I tried to sit through it, and it's just not the most entertaining. So I think that's part of the reason why.
Yeah. Also, part of the problem is you need to have that that setup of having seen the draft in the first place for it to make any sort of sense at all. Which means, okay, it's fine. You have the feature pod, and then the matches each round from feature drafter. But if the feature drafter doesn't keep winning, or then your match finishes early, you need to go to the backup feature match. Suddenly you're showing decks that your viewers have no idea like who these people are, what they're playing, right? Or they know the people, but they have no idea why they have these decks, what their strategy is. So yeah, it's much harder to make that sort of coverage work, I think.
And I remember the name, by the way, Simon Nielsen. He's the one.
Nielsen.
He got a thing reanimated against him, and it was the most crushing thing I've ever seen.
You introduced Simon by saying, "Oh, you're the nicest player." Like you could just said the best player. Like player of the year, kind of top 8 4 Pro Tours in a row. Like,
I don't know. I just always see him smiling. He's so friendly. I love the guy.
Yes, yeah.
But yeah,
so is there any sort of formats you actively avoid then? Like you don't really, unless you have to. Like,
so I don't play much Pauper. I've in the past just found the play patterns to be a bit, I don't even know how to describe it, but things get like super slow on Modo and not in the kind of the way I enjoy like a grindy modern game.
Many times you can see a Glinthawk return an artifact.
Yeah. So I've somewhat avoided Pauper, but in general I'll play anything like if there's a competitive reason. I don't know. I want to both enjoy the format and have some competitive like thing going on.
Yeah.
So
there needs to be something like not an anti, but like something you're playing for. Like for example, modern. I really enjoy modern, but I like modern best when there's a stake. If there's no stake, modern isn't very exciting. It's like you do this really powerful thing. You know, you have this interaction. It's like, yeah, it's great. Yeah, I can't be bothered sideboarding. Yeah, whatever. But if there's a stake, like this really powerful thing, then becomes exciting to me. I could sit around playing Legacy all day. I could sit around. I don't mind Pauper. Pauper's okay. I get what you mean about it's not as exciting as other formats. It isn't as exciting as other formats, but it's fine. It's good. There's some good play patterns in there. There's some interesting ways to win. But I do think like a lot of games of Magic, particularly when I think of like sort of the way the format I approach a format. If there's a stake there, it's way more interesting.
Especially with a side of potatoes.
Mm.
Delicious.
How do you like your steak? Top heavy.
Sorry, Sean. So this is everything we're talking about here, everything that comes to entering a high level of play, how to keep up with it, how to best prepare for the even if it's not Pro Tour that you've quite reached yet, at least a higher level of it. Everything that we're talking about here has culminated in one big question that we wanted to ask you, Sean. Something that we're hoping that turns a few heads. Do you think that you are the best player in the UK?
I do not. I no, like without a trace of humility, I will say I genuinely believe I'm in the top 3 right now.
Yep.
I find it very difficult not to give that accolade to Autumn, who has had like a slightly quieter run over the past few Pro Tours, but still has like 4 top finishes, like 2 of which were kind of paper Pro Tours, 1 of which was a win. Like you give them sort of a few more years, they'll be the Hall of Fame. Like I would love to catch up, but also knowing Autumn and having played them in like I think I played a bunch of the basic land games once, and it's very clear like they're on a different level, sort of with some of the play patterns they can see and they can execute. But I think I'm gaining. I think I'm I'm up there, and I would like to like stay in the top 3 at least.
So the word of the street is that you are the best player right now, anyway. So I guess if Louis said, "Do you think you're the best player right now?" would that be a different answer?
I mean, okay, right now I'm probably the highest ranked on Elo project of any UK player, except they haven't updated yet. But on CD.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you mentioned top 3. So who's the other top 3 contender? There has to be someone else in mind if you're going to say top 3.
That's much harder. Like okay, there is the other name you might mention is Sam Rolfe, who's put up a ton of results. I think is he playing in the mocks right now, or is that a different one? I don't know. He plays. He qualifies for a lot of like online tournaments, and he would be qualified for a lot more Pro Tours if he wasn't currently banned from the States. So yeah, Sam is very, very good as well.
Fair enough. Okay.
And there's a ton of other players who I think are close, and with like some luck and some good runs could top 8 Pro Tour. But I would say right now, like I'm one of the best in the UK, but the UK has a lot of catching up to do. We just we have a lot of players who are like just on the edge, but aren't quite breaking in yet. And I would love to see some more UK players crashing it.
I know we're definitely a bit behind par when it comes to the rest of Europe when it comes to.
But we have to beat France. Come on. Like France has a current world champion. We need to catch up.
Coming for you. Hope Mystique is listening to this.
So say someone's listening to this pod now and they think, oh, I really want to get into. I've been inspired to try competitive Magic. I really want to get on the Pro Tour. What advice would you give to that player wanting to go to an RCQ win that RCQ, go to an RC, qualify for a Pro Tour, and do well from literally day 0 to now. What's the one pinnacle bit of advice you can say to that person to help them or their first steps onto that pathway?
Well, okay. I would say I would have to give 2 things. I would say there's no guarantees, and so even you can do everything right, and like nowadays, like the amount of time you need to put into, and the amount, like the just chance of qualifying from any given event is so low that you probably shouldn't make this your main life goal for the year.
Yeah.
Right? It's I would, but kind of you probably shouldn't.
Well,
So
there's going to be people who are going to be in that situation where it is their job, that's their income, but those people are so small percentile, like you can't aspire to be that in that position or be that person. Like you can't, like Mengucci, for example, he makes full-time wage off this, for example, or Autumn, makes full-time wage of that. I'm not sure about yourself, but you can't, yourself and these people we're talking about, you can't aim to be like that, because it's so. It's like an actor trying to be Leonardo DiCaprio or something. You know what I mean? Some people will make it because
fall into
the
it.
chances. Yeah, you fall into it. Yeah.
yeah, but you shouldn't view this as like a career, but
No.
you should give yourself the best chances you can. And so I think one of the key pieces of advice I'd give is just to play a lot of Magic Online, which is a lot of people just they look at the interface and they're kind of turned off. But
shout out to Christian.
Yeah, but in terms of just getting better at the game, you need to play a lot against better players.
Yeah,
and there's no easy way to do that from kind of a starting point of like player FNM. You're not going to know a huge network of competitive players you can test with. The best way to play a ton and get better is to play online. And then once you're like, okay, you're regularly doing okay in challenges, then kind of you're going to see your play improve in paper at like the RCQ and then regional championship level. And then people are going to notice. Like it's so okay. I'm not saying you should do what I did kind of over lockdown, because that was lockdown. I just play way too much online Magic on Red Own Arena.
Yeah.
Far too high % of your waking hours. But if you have free time to like play Magic and you want to, and your main goal is to get better at Magic, then do stuff like Magic Modo challenges and qualifiers and the Mox pathway. And those are kind of the highest level events you can access from your bedroom, right?
Just at home, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I play a lot of Magic Online. Well, before this course I did, and I only really touch leagues. I never really touch anything else. I do want to do some challenges and stuff because I have 2 jobs. I've got a son. I've got a lot going on. So sometimes making the specific timings is hard for me. So leagues are really great for me because I can sit at 10 o'clock at night, do a league, and then go to bed or whatever. But I really want to do that sort of those sort of challenges. I'd love to do a challenge one day. Like I'd have to dedicate a whole day to do it. But and ever since I've been playing online, I've noticed that my personal paper play has improved. I mean, like it helped me win an Axiom tournament last year. Like I through Magic Online, like I was playing my deck. I got my sideboard switched, squared away. Like I understood the patterns. That's one thing actually. Well, I've gone to that. So I do think a lot of high level people are quite good at pattern recognition, and if you can learn the patterns of decks, it sort of helps you. It sort of helps you defeat those decks and learn how to defeat those decks and also how to play around certain patterns, if you were. And the only way to get those patterns is to get the reps in, and the best way to get those reps in is to play Magic Online. So yeah, I highly recommend anyone. I echo what Sean said. If you want to get instantly better at this game, play Magic Online. And Magic Online specifically, like I guess Arena is like I don't even touch Arena. Arena to me is like it's not a different game, but Magic Online specifically will make you better at the game, in my opinion.
the many late nights I've been on Discord with you, Josh. Trust me, you definitely play more than just leagues. You play some challenges. That's for sure. Seeing you pilot Phoenix is a challenge and a half. Oof, man, oh man.
Yeah, I don't get along with that deck.
Oh man, no, but
So
it's true. There is a lot to be earned from playing something like Moto. It is one of the best places for high level play, especially
yeah,
because you can do it from the comfort of your own home. So
yeah,
it helps a lot in just getting the reps in, getting the practice in. And you heard it from Sean. Sean is, if he's saying it, he just top 8 at a pro tour and keeps showing up and doing really well. I mean, there's
yeah.
something there.
I was so happy when you top eight that pro tour, because I'm like I'm like very patriotic. I'm like, yes, England, yeah, UK. I was like, I was made up. I was brilliant. I thought it was class. And I speak to Will quite a lot, and he has loads of good things to say about yourself, and it's a real good, it's a really good experience for as a spectator. So at what point? So we talked about like you start your pathway, play Magic Online, that'll get you better. At what point do you think you should be reaching out to a team?
So I think as early as possible, you should be like connecting with local and regional players and connecting with whoever you've met who is happy to who you're friendly with and who's happy to test with you. You should be working with other people just as soon as possible. You're not realistically, you're not going to go from just qualifying for your first RC to being on a pro team.
Yeah.
It's as in if you're looking at the big name pro teams, there's going to be you're going to need to get to know people, to make connections, to get some results, to get into that. But
yeah.
But the main thing is to just always be working with other people and always improving yourself and helping other people improve. So the current team I'm on were mostly people in I'd say kind of a tier below Handshake or whatever in terms of our results and experience, and certainly at the time, who were qualified at the time of Minneapolis last year. And Zen Takahashi posted on Twitter saying, "Okay, I'm putting a team together. Who's interested?" I just DM'd him, said, "Look, and at this point, I'd say, okay, I qualified for a few pro tours in the past. I'd had these decent results. I'd had these good limited results, and I had a reference from a friend of Zen's. So it's okay, I get into this group, and then." Since then, we've actually just grown to be directly competing with those top teams. I wouldn't say we're quite at the level of CFB, but I mean Handshake are kind of falling off, I'm afraid. So we're crushing Handshake, and we're right at kind of.
I love that team rivalry. I love that. Right. Well, we're coming up to time now. Luis, have you got any afterburners for Sean?
No, I think pretty much everything we wanted has been answered. There's been a lot of fun stuff, a lot of fun digs as well that I wanted to get in, towards Handshake or whether Sean is or isn't the best player. He was very humble. Wanted him to be a little more chaotic, but here we are.
Sean, have you got anything to add? Anything you want to say?
It's been great.
Where can we find you? Where can we find you on Twitter, socials? We're gonna add it all to the show notes anyway. But if you want to do any shout outs or anything.
No, you'll see me on Twitter, _ Sean Goddard _ I've just put out a guide for the new guide for the Teamer deck. If you want to learn how to play lands and standard, I am charging £0 for it.
Brilliant.
Free guide, anyone can read it, so go and do that.
So what we'll do is we'll attach that guide to the show notes as well.
Yeah,
can you do that, Luis? Yeah, sweet. So thanks, Sean. Thanks, Luis, for
thank you very much
coming on.
Thanks.
It's always nice to have you.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, guys. It's always very much appreciated. And then, Sean, just because I don't think you actually said it once during the podcast, what is the name of your team?
Worldly Council.
Worldly Council. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I was wondering. I was I'm pretty sure we didn't say it once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to, like in the show notes, there's a tradition that every team member who tweets or writes about the name spells it wrong. And
Fantastic.
usually spells it wrong in a
Okay.
different way. So if you do that, you can just say it's intentional. It's fine.
Yeah, you got it.
So we
You
need to
got
spell it wrong. Okay, cool.
Not a worries. Well, yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this wonderful episode with Sean Goddard, one of the absolute beast of the UK Magic scene, soon to be ranked number 1 on, what was it, Elo Tracker or whatever it was called. I hope you join us for the next episode and you learned a lot from this one. Take care. Have a great one.
Bye, guys.
Bye.